welcome everyone to Sport Tech Daily's episode with Nick Busuttil. He's a PhD candidate in Sport Biomechanics at La Trobe and also a tennis coach. So look, welcome Nick, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Nicole. Looking forward to this chat and interview.
Awesome, all right, cool. Look, I like to always start off with an introduction of who we're speaking to. So can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, awesome. So I have been a tennis coach for the last 9 years. I started that when I was in high school and I'm still continuing that now. I'm actually also the sports scientist at my tennis academy, where we're doing athlete testing, more so the physiological side of things, rather than the biomechanics, because biomechanics is a little bit harder. I did an undergraduate course as an exercise science at La Trobe University. And then from this, I was in two minds of going down the exercise physiology therapy pathway. So it's called an exercise physiologist, or down research. So I ended up doing an honours degree rather than going into the Masters of Clinical Exercise Physiology, just because I wanted to see, it was a 1 year degree and see what it would be like to do research.
Right.
In this time, I was actually fortunate enough to work along with Tennis Australia, where I was able to complete my honours degree and got a first class honours. During this time as well, I was also allowed, not allowed, but I was fortunate enough to actually work with them within, I think, a span of a year and a half, just helping out with their elite athletes, any data processing, anything I was really required. I strung a lot of rackets, definitely made my hands bleed with all that, but definitely worth my time. Then in 2019, after my honours, I completed just a year of kind of work. So I worked as a research assistant and also a teaching assistant at La Trobe University, where I was fortunate enough to work with some other, I guess, PhD people, but also just research projects going on with the military defense force, the Boston Red Sox, just a lot of kind of data processing side of things. And then this year, I started my official PhD at La Trobe University. And I was fortunately recently to have my first article published, which was the first data set from my honours data. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, that's pretty extensive stuff. So I guess in terms of La Trobe, can you tell us about what type of work you'll be doing for your PhD, just as a high level, like what areas you're going to look into, and where you're up to with that now?
So probably best off going off with a bit of a background with the honours first. So the honours, I looked at the effect of grip position in a double-handed backhand. So tennis is on multiple different strokes, but one under-researched area is the double-handed backhand in tennis. So I just played around with the grip positions and just found that, so one grip's called the Eastern grip, one grip's called the Continental grip. The continental grip made your arm a bit more extended out, and that was pretty much the highlight of the first paper. Also, that the continental grip was slower in terms of ball speed and racket speed as well. So the Eastern you could consider to be a bit more of a performance beneficial grip, but that information can be used elsewhere. So for the PhD, it's kind of following that on rather than, okay, we know that the continental grip results in slower racket and arm movements, which is actually what my second data set found, which is hopefully about to be published in the next couple of months. So by using that, we can actually try to tailor coaching programs. So obviously I'm a tennis coach as well. My PhD is going to be incorporating, I guess, skill development in tennis, and whether using specific grip molds can help to learn the techniques of the forehand, the backhand, and also doing a few different coaching interventions as well.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I was just gonna say, in terms of what you're doing. So how long would the PhD go on for? Like, when would you expect to complete it?
So for the moment, I am currently studying part-time, but I think that's going to change as of later this year. So I'm going to say about 4 to 5 years is what it's going to take to, I guess, finish this PhD. It's also just making sure we can get the right support and, I guess, funding for it all. Because obviously, if we're doing coaching interventions, you've got to involve coaches. Also got to get students, going to have different age groups. There's a lot of processing involved in biomechanics as well. So have to factor in all that time. and then obviously the write-up and research analysis. So yeah, so probably about 4 to 5 years.
Right. Okay. Well, with how you describe it, it makes complete sense that it's going to take that long. So
Yes,
it
definitely.
definitely sounds interesting, though. Look, what I think the other thing I was interested to discuss, with Sport Tech Daily, one of the main things that we're trying to do is if we're speaking to people, within the industry and have a sport tech startup, for example, it's really
Mhm.
interesting to how that could link with someone like yourself who's working with a university, doing research for an extended period of time. What have you found as have you noticed any differences between working, say, with Tennis Australia or any other sort of organization or corporate body compared to university?
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, working in a high performance field, elite sport is would say it's there's high levels expected,
Right.
as it's in the name, high performance sport. So I definitely got to experience aspects of that, but I don't think I got to experience the full picture of working in high performance sport, as I was only kind of like a casual, where it was like once or twice a week, just doing the data processing. Got to interact with the athletes, so I got to actually work with Daria Gavlarova and Sam Stoser doing
Cool.
biomechanical analysis. So my colleague, not yeah, colleague there, she was doing a PhD recently submitted as well. And she was doing analysis of elite sportsmen in comparison to younger athletes. So I was able to help her out with those things. There's a whole lot of projects going on at Tennis Australia, which is really exciting. So if I can still be a part of that, would love to be. So with, I guess, the difference working from there to university, you're your own boss, I would like to say.
Yeah. Right.
Um, like you get a bit more freedom. You have to set your own time schedules. You got to make your own deadlines and so forth. Where I guess working in high performance sport, you've got this time. You've got to get it done in this time.
Right.
Um, and there's also that factor of communicating the results to coaches. And that's probably one of the hardest parts of the not the hardest part of the sports biomechanist, but an area that sometimes when you can get too technical with language,
Mm.
people can get lost. So it's just about being able to communicate the right information in the right way to the coaches, especially if we're
Okay.
doing,
I
yeah.
think in terms of that point, I was just going to say, in terms of my work, I've dealt with a lot of data scientists and data analysts, and they say the exact same thing. Whether it's doing a PhD at La Trobe and you're dealing with Tennis Australia, or whether it's working at a Qantas or a Commonwealth Bank, when you're someone from a technical background dealing with stakeholders or
Mm,
anyone that's less technical, that will definitely be a challenge. But look,
yes.
it's good to see that you've picked that up and you're just starting a PhD. There's a lot more scope to sort of expand on your skills there.
Yes, exactly. It's definitely it's probably one of my areas I definitely need to improve on.
Right. And
Um,
the other thing
yeah.
I was just going to say, in terms of the research that you're doing at the moment, it seems like it's quite specific to tennis. But in terms of the work that you've done previously or want to do, is it definitely going to have to be within tennis that you specialize and you work longer term, or would there be opportunities in other areas of sport to apply what you're learning now?
So with my specific research, I would say it's limited to tennis. You could transfer a few things depending on some analyses um, to sports like golf or other club sports because they share similar, I guess, movement patterns to
Right.
tennis in the takebacks. But in terms of what I've gained out of my own research, definitely the three-dimensional analysis and employing that, and I guess understanding of joint mechanics and how the body moves, I can apply that to pretty much any sport. I wouldn't say I'm a professional per se right now. I'm still at the very start of my PhD,
Yeah.
but I definitely have a nice understanding of the human body and how it works. And to be at the end of a PhD labeled as a sports biomechanist, I think I could apply my research to the majority of most sports, but more so the analysis side, not the findings side. But with the PhD, if findings not findings, I guess discoveries do come out well with the coaching interventions and so forth, then obviously you can try to apply that to other sports as well. But
Awesome.
right now, it'll be specific to tennis, I'd say mainly for the number side of things.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Okay, cool. And I guess in terms of your journey so far, which resources have you found the biggest help? Especially, whether it's sort of online resources like YouTube channels or podcasts, or people that you've sort of worked with in your career so far.
Yeah. Look, definitely YouTube's a good help. YouTube helps with a lot of the data pressing side of things, especially with Excel skills. Trobe University provide a very extensive staff help list as well. So when you're a PhD, you're considered staff as well. So they have a lot of resources, especially for like research and engines. So looking for articles in particular platforms, things to look out for is really, really helpful. Obviously, the people you work along with. So my supervisor, I couldn't thank him enough for what he's done for my honours year and just the start of the PhD. So that's Dr. Kane Middleton as well. So he's a very, very experienced man who's done a lot of great work in sports biomechanics and ergonomic biomechanics.
All right, nice. And in terms of, I guess, the work that you do, I appreciate that it's obviously quite technical, but do you still find that, there's sort of podcasts or material out there that you're able to relate to and work on, or is it very much you're in your field, you're in your bubble, and sort of it's only really the people around you that are most helpful?
Um, I'd say at the start, what I've noticed is because we have a group of people doing PhDs together who like we've all started this year. We're all doing not sports biomechanics, but like other areas of sports science working together.
Yeah.
And we're definitely creating a network now to at least bounce ideas off each other, learn from each other. Obviously, we have our supervisors who are there to guide us. But in terms of, I think what I've noticed with the Twitter sphere is actually everyone's quite helpful with each other. So if you post a question, you're going to get an answer and probably a good answer at that. A lot of people go above beyond just rather than saying yes or no, it's okay, yeah, try this or do that. I guess in the recent light of the coronavirus crisis, some well-respected sports biomechanists in the field have developed online lecture series just to help people to enhance their knowledge in sports biomechanics in particular sports. So that's all around Twitter at the moment. It'll be shared elsewhere as well. I'm not so sure where. It's just Twitter's as far as I know. But yeah, so definitely is a worldwide network, but the people around you are probably going to make a big difference as well.
Right. Okay. So have you found that Twitter is the main one in terms of finding content that's relevant and helpful to you?
For the research part, yes, I think Twitter has actually provided a very good platform with current up-to-date research. Because I wouldn't say there's too often people are going around posting, "Oh, look what this is" on Facebook. Definitely when my article was published, I did that because I got as much as I could. But yeah, definitely on Twitter, you just develop those connections, and just responding here and there to a few comments and tweets will literally create a relationship. So
Yeah. All right, excellent. And what about from the technical skills point of view? What are the tools or the methods of modeling or analysis that you found that you've had to use the most in the last few years?
So what my data was my research I was completed doing three-dimensional analysis. So three-dimensional is just incorporating all planes of motion. So we've got X, Y, Z motions in our movement. So this is actually considered the gold standard of biomechanical analysis compared to like a video analysis, for example, which is just a two-dimensional analysis. So it's just one view, where the three-dimensional, we get the whole view of the person at once. And this is also like a real lifetime movement. So we can capture it, and then once it's processed and applied with like the specific models and to get the numbers on the dots, essentially, that's where the most accurate data can be made. So that's pretty much where the tools that I've developed is the three-dimensional motion capture. Within this, you can also do kind of like force plate stuff. So you can look at ground forces, and depending on, there's many different systems that will allow you to do this. But definitely the three-dimensional analysis, Vicon is a gold standard for sports biomechanists and any biomechanists doing an analysis.
Right. Okay. Because it sounds like the tools that you're using are very specific to your work. Is there any use of things like, Excel or Python or R or?
Yeah. So definitely, that's another skill I'm developing as we go is the MATLAB, Python, definitely all that coding skills that we need to help with the data processing and data managing. So when there's like a large data set, obviously you don't want to be going manually copy and pasting every single number. That gets quite tedious and time consuming. So definitely a part of the PhD journey as well is to actually develop those technical data skills. So that's definitely on my to-do list and very limited at the moment, but definitely got the appreciation of that. So when it gets to I guess the data collection of the PhD, those skills are going to become really, really helpful.
Right. Okay. Excellent. And I guess for people that are maybe doing a bachelor's degree or come from I guess are interested in sport but don't have the technical background to look into the areas that they would love to, what would you recommend as a starting point in terms of technical skills or resources to tap into?
Yeah, well, as generic as it sounds, you actually just have to give it a go. You have to give every corner of sports science a go. So I've had, I guess, my hand in some physiology. I've had my hand in some skill acquisitions or learning skill, biomechanics, some data science stuff as well. And you don't know what you enjoy or what you're passionate about until you actually do it. That was the same thing with me choosing to go down the research career. So I've obviously had that dream of working in an elite sporting field, which I still would like to do one day. But then once I've, I guess, gone down the teaching pathway with the Trobe and research assistant stuff, it's actually much more enjoyable than I expected. So I didn't know that I wanted to go down this pathway rather than working in elite sport. Even though elite sport is obviously high pressure, there's a lot more, I guess, interaction and I won't say it's not more practical, but in that environment, which is definitely a good experience. But I feel like by working at the university level, you can actually develop those relationships just to work in the high performance field and be like a liaison. So with the undergrad students, even though you got your minimum requirements for like a sports science student or anyone in general, do more than that. You need to actually get your hand in everything. And you need to try things that might put you out of your comfort zone, but you don't know if you're going to enjoy it or not. Right. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of undergraduate students, including myself for the first 2 years, was you just do the bare minimum. But it's not until you get to the end, you're like, oh, geez, what am I going to do now? Like you got to develop those extra certificates, those extra skills as you're going through. And those opportunities will always be available to you. I guess it's a little harder for the next couple of months for the current cohort people with the whole stay at home at the moment. But either way, those opportunities will still be made available to you in some form.
Right.
And so the best thing I can say is just put your face in everywhere. Go for it.
Awesome. Well, that's one of the reasons why I was really excited to have a chat with you, because only recently I've discovered more about the sort of sports science space in Australia. Like I knew there was a few sport analytics and sports science degrees. I knew there's obviously people out there working with a lot of the main sporting bodies, but going on to Twitter and speaking to a few of the guys, including yourself over at La Trobe, I think it's a really exciting opportunity for Australia to bring our skills and showcase them, A, in Australia, but then B, take them globally. So I guess now that you're in that, that bubble and you're doing your PhD at the moment, what are some of the, I guess, career options available, not just for you personally, but if you're in that sports science space over at La Trobe, what are, say, 2 or 3 of the main career options that people would look at after finishing up?
So there's the obvious I'm working at the university, so eventually becoming a lecturer, so developing lecturer content to teach to undergraduate students. You can also just be more of a teaching focused academic rather than a research focus. So there's a few different roles in there. With having a PhD as well, obviously it's more about developing those, I think, data management skills. So using, like I said, Python, MATLAB, all those type of things, and being able to learn something as a real scientific, technical point of view, but then to communicate it across to people who are in charge of high-level athletes, for
Right.
example. So high-performance sport is a hard thing to crack into, and a lot of people who work in high-performance sport have those PhD backgrounds, working behind the scenes, and then doing the analysis, doing all the data processing, and transferring the data to the coaches who are trying to prepare the athletes to play as best as possible. So those are probably the two main things from sports biomechanics. But that being said as well, there's so many other strands of biomechanics being ergonomics, whereas literally as an ergonomic is having a functional computer work desk space. So having your elbows at table height, having the screen above your nose as a point of reference. It's just those little things like that to help reduce, I guess, well, there you go, straight my back as I think about it. But it's reducing, like, for example, we're sitting in a seat for an increased amount of time, you're just increasing lower lumbar pressure, and lower lumbar forces. So we want to minimize that by sitting in an optimal position. And that's the other strand of biomechanics as well. My supervisor worked for the Defence Force for a couple of years. There's a lot of places that I guess employ research scientists just to be a part of their group.
Yeah. And what about, so you mentioned universities, streams within universities. There's options within obviously the high performance sporting sector, but it seems like those, especially jobs with, say, Cricket Australia, Tennis Australia, AFL, NRL, etc., they would be relatively few and far between. Have you sort of looked into or noticed much around startup or sort of corporate companies within sport tech or biomechanics, or is that not much of an option in Australia because the industry is small?
No. So definitely, in terms of a technology point of view, there's a heap of, I guess, technology that have got their own companies and they're using their own sports scientists to develop things. So that's more down, I guess, the data analytics side of things of sports science. But even that being said, all those devices that are being developed, they've got their own team of sports scientists working to actually use them properly, to make sure their database is running fine for the sporting teams who are actually using these devices. And even just straight out of undergraduate, there is a lot of opportunity as sports scientists to work for sporting clubs. To get to the elite stage, you have to be pretty lucky to get it right out of the undergraduate degree, because generally most people working in the elite are either in a PhD or have completed a PhD.
Right.
So they have a lot of people who learn the technical skills first before they can actually employ that. But that being said, there's still the opportunities to work in the VFL, for an example. I know a few people from my undergraduate year are now working in or got a VFL job right out the bat, just because of the experience they got during the undergraduate degree.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's just a matter of, that's why I highlighted before, is don't do the bare minimum, try to get what experience you can. So I got exposed to Tennis Australia halfway through my last year of undergraduate, and then that's where it turned into a honours degree.
Right.
So
I think
I
was just going to say, sorry, I think that's something that's really important when you're speaking to people that are outside of the industry. What we're trying to do with Sport Tech Daily, we're trying to speak to people that might be in sports science, that might be in sport tech startups, they might be in the betting and the fantasy world, they might be in sport analytics. There's a few different areas within wider sport tech. And I think what I've found is, look, a couple of these areas I know a lot about and I'm personally quite interested in them. Sports science happens to be one of the areas that I'm learning more about very quickly as I'm speaking to people like yourself. And I think a really good way to get exposure to a new industry is understand the high level. So I think that's what, a few of the areas that you've covered, like what options are available to you while you're at university, what options are available once you're aiming to get into the workforce, whether that's at university, whether that's in sort of technical companies, or whether that's with sporting organizations. I think that's a really good learning curve and sort of points for people that are in their undergrad degrees or potentially might be doing a commerce degree, but they're like, oh, I love sport. I'd love to get into it. What Nick's established or Nick's been able to do in the last, say, 3-5 years is really interesting. And maybe I could go down that path as well. But I think there's just, a lot of this information and these networks are almost in silos. So that's what we're trying to do, essentially bring it all together.
No, that's good. It's a really good cause that you're doing this, and I think it's going to work, especially in the long run. So keep up with all of this. I think a lot of people can benefit from all these people talking. So.
No, excellent. All right. And I guess just to finish off on a lighter note, what about yourself personally? Like, what sport or sports are you personally most interested in?
Well, I guess the obvious one is tennis.
Yeah.
Being a tennis coach. Definitely. Funny enough, I don't like to watch it too often. I love to play it. Watching it's a little bit harder, but either way, the research into it's always going to be interesting to me. Just understanding how to optimize the movements and to get the best out of performance, or if it's to reduce injury risk or reduce some pain someone's experiencing. Another passion of mine is probably soccer, or football for the ones in Europe. I'm a big Arsenal fan myself, so I'll be loud and proud about that. I haven't looked too much into the biomechanics side of things, but definitely the player monitoring and loading, physiological aspects of soccer is always really interesting to me. And I've been able to apply that to, the athletes that I'm in charge of at my tennis academy with their testing and just trying to monitor them best the way I can.
Excellent. All right. And I guess just to finish off with, this is something I love asking people. So with the skill set that you've got, if you could work with one, I'm assuming it's going to be tennis, but if you could work with one sporting team or player to work on a problem of theirs and find a solution, who would it be and why?
Yeah. It's a little hard as a biomechanist to, I guess, pick out a code or a team. Like, you got to think of them as individuals.
Yeah, even if it's a player.
Yeah. So I'll do a sprinter actually. I think think about it as a sprinter. So we're using we use Usain Bolt as an example. He is pretty much biomechanically perfect in the way he sprinted. So you get the was it 9.58 for the 100 seconds, whatever it is. But there's just, I guess, you got to break down the variables that help him to, I guess, achieve that speed. So I guess with sprinters, you're looking at your stride length and your stride frequency. So you can't really change the 100-meter distance to get there faster, but you can always change the time taken to get there. Obviously, we're going to cover as fast as we can. So by looking at those two variables like stride length, that's where we kind of try to optimize the if we're going into the lower limb, the hip, knee, and ankle joint centers, and how they move. So we can actually get the optimal, I guess, stride length. And then there's stride frequency, where reducing the amount of contact time with the ground. You would want the sprinting athletes to kind of be elastic, so that they're springing off the ground and propelling themselves forward, I guess, as fast as they can per stride. And obviously, the less contact time with the ground, there's less time to, I guess, try to absorb the ground reaction forces, and rather than make it more of that, as I use the term, elastic bounce through. So springing through. I guess a high profile example of sprinting mechanics would be Cristiano Ronaldo. He runs with his arms really ridiculously close to his body. And it's been, well, not close, but he shakes his shoulders in a way that actually limits his speed. So, and it's been widely, I guess, discussed. But if he were to change the way he moves his arms, he could probably gain some extra. I guess he probably can cover a 100-meter distance, or in their term, probably like a 20-meter sprint in a faster rate compared to what he is doing now. Well, obviously, that's not his primary goal. His primary goal is to literally score a goal, and accurately with a lot of power. So he's emphasized his kicking mechanics to strike it beautifully per se. But that's just like a one little thing. If he's out of a high-profile person that I can think of off the top of my head, it's his arms and the way it moves. He kind of shimmies himself close in. So
that's excellent. Yeah, because I'll put you on the spot a little bit, but I think it's really interesting for people that aren't as involved in this space as you are, to get a real life example of, you know, how your research and your work you know, can essentially be seen in real life in really popular examples. So that was really helpful.
No, it's good.
Awesome. All right. Well, look, thanks for coming on, Nick. It was really interesting, and definitely I think it'll help open a lot of eyes for people that are outside the industry. So it was super helpful, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch. And for anyone that's obviously listening to this and would like to get in touch, when we post it on the site, we'll have a link to your Twitter, and they can get in touch there as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that, guys.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick.
Get easy.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to check out more of our content, go to sporttechdaily.com or follow us on social media across Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram.